Now, how do you create a compelling character that can carry a series? Because a lot of times, I watch a series and it's starting out, and it's just the character himself or herself is not strong enough to hold the weight of a whole series. It might hold the weight of a movie, might hold the weight of a few episodes, maybe a season, but not for not for a run of 5, 6, 7, 8 seasons. I mean, what do you do to kind of create that compelling character?
Well, I think they have to have a compelling backstory, or what you might call their ghost. Like Don Draper on Mad Men, he had this backstory where Don Draper wasn't his real name. He assumed the identity of a guy that he was serving in Korea with, and this officer in Korea, they were in a battle together. The officer, whose name was Don Draper, died, and they confused the two, and they thought he was Don Draper, and they thought the guy who died was Dick Whitman, and so he just assumed the guy's identity and totally rebooted his life, came to New York, and ended up becoming an advertising executive. So he has this whole backstory, which essentially is a federal crime, right? So he's kind of evading the law. Like, he doesn't want people to know his secret. And it's all about this duality that he's pretending to be another person, really, the whole time, which matches up with and kind of parallels his occupation, which is advertising. Advertising is pretending this glamour, this glamorous world to sell baked beans or whatever it is. So that's an example. But in my story map, I say there's 4 things that you want to define for a protagonist. So this is right off the bat, before you even start writing the pilot. Mm-hmm. This is just your initial outline. So I go with defining characteristic, skill, misbehavior, and Achilles heel or flaw. So the defining characteristic could be their occupation, or could be just something that could be something they're good at, or could be just some way to capture them. Okay. The skill is something that they're really good at. So like Walter White, his skill was obviously chemistry, so he was good at that. So he was able to make that. The misbehavior is a quirk or trait that consistently generates conflict. So maybe they have no filter and they're always talking out. Maybe they're making funny asides. Maybe they're a snob, something. And then the Achilles heel or flaw, which may relate to their ghost, is that thing that can destroy them. So like in I would say probably in Mad Men, Don Draper's Achilles heel or flaw is that he's actually Dick Whitman. He actually is not the person that he's saying he is,
So like in Tony Soprano's ghost or secret is, you can't, if anybody in his crew found out that he was going to a therapist, it'd be done.
Yeah, I would say his therapist. Initially, there was a lot with his mother, right? Like he kind of had a big mother complex.
Right.
So she was almost kind of his Achilles heel as well. But his defining characteristic, I would say he's kind of impatient, or he's, I don't know, the frustrated leader. Maybe like he kind of doesn't want to be the leader in some ways, And then his skill is he is a pretty good leader. And his misbehavior maybe is that he's violent. He has a temper.
Right. He'll go off the handle.
So those are characteristics that go into him and that you could use to write him,
So those 4 elements really do help to set up a compelling character in a series that could hold a series for a while.
Yeah. So I think that's like the minimum that you would need.
Now, and I'm sure you found this, a lot of times when shows start, as they say, jump the shark, to refer to Happy Days back in the day. When a show jumps the shark, a lot of times either that story engine has run out of gas, or the character himself or herself has kind of either caught whatever was interesting about them before has either been waned, it's watered down, it's been resolved, and they haven't been able to pick up another thing to keep that character going. Because obviously, I have not seen Mad Men, believe it or not. So I'm not sure somewhere in the series did they find out his secret, and
certain people along the way.
Well, yeah,
found out
But is there like an explosion, meaning like a story explosion that like everybody, the cops come in and he's arrested? Like, is there a moment like that?
There never really is, no.
Okay, so I kept
The
that.
end of the first season, there's a big confrontation. His nemesis tries to turn him into the boss, and the boss says, "Who cares?" Which is kind of funny. So he ends up winning in that sense.
Right. All right. But so a lot of times, if you're not able to keep that thing going, the show just dies because it's not interesting. And I found that a lot of times when I watched I think 6 seasons of The Walking Dead, and it just got to a point where I was just like, I can't anymore. It just kind of I mean, it was great at the beginning and it was awesome, but it's just at a certain point you're just like, again.
And do you think it was just the devices kept being repetitive, or that you didn't care about the characters anymore?
No, I could tell you exactly the moment when Deegan showed up. When Deegan, which is supposed to be the biggest, baddest bad guy. Negan. Yeah. The biggest bad guy in the Walking Dead universe, according to the comics, shows up, and everybody was so excited when he showed up and everything. His antagonist was so brutal in the point where the good guys could not get a lick in, so that it was too overpowering. It's kind of like when the villain is too strong, and and all the other characters, nothing they did, he just constantly beat them. So even in a fight, even in a Rocky fight, Drago beats him up in Rocky 4 and is beating him, and you're like, oh, but Rocky gets in a lick and cuts him. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's a chance. So it's just like, it's like The Rock going after a 5-year-old. Like, there's nothing the 5-year-old's going to do that's going to physically match up. And at that point, it gets boring. And then also, I've also built up a love for the characters, and I don't want to see my characters constantly get just abused. I get once in a while, but it was just constant. And I just like, both my wife and I just said, you know what, I can't take, and it was a season of this. And even at the end of the season, it was really the guy's still there.
They didn't get a win.
They didn't, not really. And if they did, I didn't remember it. It wasn't appeasing enough for me. So I just walked away. And now I'm hearing that, what's his name's coming back, and after he left the show, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, but I can't. But I go, is Negan around? Oh, Negan's still around. I can't. And like, if they would have killed him in the first season, that would have probably kept going over the first time he showed up. But he just keeps coming back. So that was my feeling.
There are shows that are just too dark, and you get sick of it. You get sick of your characters losing.
Right.
You want them to have a win. They need to have a win every now and then. And you need to root for them to have a win. But if they're just going to lose and it's just going to be a complete downer,
right?
Then you might bail out of a show.
Right, and that's a lot of times why people bail out of their sports teams, because they just keep getting beat up all the time. And you're like, well, the only reason you watch a sporting event or you watch a movie or a show is because you hope that whoever you're rooting for has a chance. So like the Avengers, perfect example. Thanos was fairly an unstoppable object. I mean, and they established him so beautifully in Infinity War, where within the first 10 minutes, he literally wipes the floor with the Hulk, which is arguably the biggest, baddest guy in the Marvel side of things. And everyone just said, oh man. So even Thanos, who has this power that is just so overpowering, and he won, but yet you felt that there was hope. And they did get a couple licks in, and there was a way to do it. And it was going to take the entire Marvel universe against this guy to beat him. But there was still hope there. Well, if Thanos just kept beating on everybody, and it's boring. It's boring.
Yeah. And you notice the only real movie with a dark ending was Infinity War.
Which is basically The Empire Strikes Back. At the end, it's like the middle part. It's the middle part. It's a two-parter.
Yeah. But if every Avengers movie or every Marvel movie had a dark ending, the audience would have been turned off a long time ago, I think.
And also,
it wouldn't have been as successful.
And you also knew that Endgame was coming a few months later. Yeah. However, like everyone knew, like, okay, we're not waiting 2 more years for this. Like, okay, it's coming next year. It's coming next summer or something like that. And we know they're coming back. Good. Yeah. But but like something like Walking Dead, they didn't. They just it was just this constant pounding. So that's something that everyone listening, make sure whoever your protagonist is, give them a win, even if they have a very powerful foe, which you need. You need a powerful foe to make this thing go, right?
Yeah, you need a good antagonist. You need a good nemesis. But yeah, I would say it can still, like, your pilot can still end on a dark moment.
Yeah, sure.
It has to end on a trigger that triggers the first season's engine. So whatever the main conflict is going to be for that first season, it has to be generated at least by the end of the pilot, and that has to be compelling. And that has to be something that you can see generating a lot of episodes. Now, it could be a loss, I guess, but it's probably a little bit better if it's a win. But really the way I would characterize it is usually pulling the carpet out from under the protagonist, like something you didn't see coming, they didn't see coming, they never thought it would get this bad, this whatever. Maybe they're going through a gateway, maybe a door is slammed in their face, some kind of opportunity, but the rug has been pulled out from under them, and it's like the oh shit moment, basically, at the end of every pilot, which then triggers the first season. So like in Scandal, you find out during the pilot that she had an affair with the president of the United States, and he has hired her because he's been accused by an intern of having an affair, right? And she doesn't want to believe it at first. Well, by the end of the episode, she knows it was true. And so the trigger at the end is she starts representing the intern, the accuser of the president. So now she's diametrically opposed to the president as opposed to being his former mistress and trying to help him. So that really gives you that like, oh crap moment. So now, this first season, she's going to be taking on the president in addition to new cases coming in during the week.
And I just finished watching How to Get Away with Murder, which is also another Shonda.
Seen that. Is that good?
It's amazing, especially that first season where, I mean, in the pilot, it's about, well, who killed this dude? And like the whole season's about who killed this person. And what's done so beautifully in that show is at the beginning of every episode, there's a flash forward to, a flashback to the night of the murder. And they just little by little, every episode give you just a little bit more information, until you finally get to the answer. And it's not at the end of the season. Generally, you get to the answer by the middle of the season. And then the rest of the season, they're figuring out how to get away with it. So it's really wonderful. It was a very unique structure of how they were able to do it. And we were hooked from the moment you watch the first episode. You're just like, okay, I heard this is good. Let's watch it. And you're just like, well, I got to know who killed him. And the way they set it all up. And then that she's a teacher. She's a lawyer who's teaching people, how you would get away with murder, how you would defend that person who got away with murder. It was just, it's wonderfully constructed.
And does she take the case at the midpoint of the season? Does she end up defending the murderer, or they're just kind of analyzing how the case might go?
She's kind of involved, but she actually never kills anybody. But she's always in the hurricane. She's always inside, and it's very close. So, I mean, I'm not giving anything away. They kill her husband. So, and it's her husband. So you're wondering, did she do it? Did her students do it? Did the sister do it? Like, and you're just like this whodunit, but she's a really amazing attorney, and she, and she's like a force of nature. So then she has to defend herself because she's accused, and there's all sorts of, it just constantly, you don't know. And that's the one thing I love about that show specifically. And I think if you could do this as a writer in today's world, you have a job. If you can come up with something that has not been seen before, or not seen before, if you can write the story in a way that I can't tell what's going to happen next. Because you and I are
surprising turns.
Yeah, you and I are both fairly educated in the story spectrum. I've seen hundreds of thousands of hours, and most people have seen that. Even if we're not in the business of constructing story, we've just seen enough to know, oh, the bad guy's going to do this. Oh, she's going to do that. I love a show that I'm like, I'll turn to my wife and I'll just go, I have no idea what's happening. I have no idea where this is going. And that's
great. A good example that you said it was her husband who was killed. It has to be a consequential person. If you're going to hang a whole season on a murder case, it has to be consequential, or even just any engine. So like in Scandal, she didn't just have an affair with like some lawyer or some CEO. She had the affair with the president of the United States, right. How to Get Away with Murder. It wasn't just some random person that was killed. It was her husband, So think about that when you write your concepts. That's what makes it high concept, and that, or maybe the better term is high drama, high consequences.
And it's funny enough that first season, that story engine, the ghost of that, even after it's resolved, it kept coming back. It kept coming back because you got away with it. That's the name of the show. You got away with murder, but it's always lingering. Is that secret, like in Mad Men? It's like that thing, and there's multiple people involved. Is anybody going to talk? And then sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And what's going to happen? And who's dead now? And oh my God! And it just constantly kept that engine going. It did finish. I think this was the last season. They did 6 seasons of it. But I could have kept going. But at a certain point, he started like, how many times can this person get away with murder? Like, how many times can you do this? But for the run, it was fantastic. It really, really was.